So before we begin this powerful and holy chapter, I would say, chapter 10, the chapter of mitzvot in this book of 13 Petalled Rose, just a few introductory notes. Number one, a story with Rabbi Steinsaltz comes to mind, a story that you'll sense throughout the words of this chapter. It's a story I may have shared before, but I remember being with him in San Francisco about 11, 12 years ago. And there he gave a big lecture at the JCC. 1,000 people or more showed up, and at the very end there was a Q&A. And this woman stood up and went to the microphone, and she had a question for Rabbi Steinsaltz. And she asked Rabbi Steinsaltz, how can I feel God? How can I come close to God? And Rabbi Steinsaltz so powerfully and so sharp-mindedly answered, well, you're asking two separate questions. How can you feel God? And how can you come close to God? And with his very unique sense of humor and sharp-mindedness, as mentioned, he says to her, well, if you want to feel God, possibly a few milligrams of LSD will help you. But if you want to come close to God, there are 613 ways to come close to God. So pick one. This chapter, we'll be learning about those 613 ways. And we'll be learning about how really it's impossible to fulfill all of the 613 commandments, how we ought to fulfill as many, or at least we ought to fulfill those mitzvot that we're inclined to fulfill. Why? Because we are sent here, our souls are sent here on a very specific purpose to this world. Now, if we are inclined towards performing some mitzvot over the others, it's probably because our soul senses that these are the mitzvot that will bring it rectification or bring it, as we call it, tikkun, and therefore it has an inclination to fulfill those mitzvot. That explains why some people maybe are more drawn towards, say, the mitzvah of tzedakah, and some people are more drawn towards the mitzvah of learning Torah. Some people are more drawn towards the mitzvah of Shabbat, and some people are more drawn towards the mitzvah of respecting your parents, whatever it may be. But that, again, has a lot to do with the individual mission of our soul. So he stresses this point quite powerfully. And again, I think it's a great reminder that even though when we hear the word or the term of 630 mitzvot, we may become overwhelmed. We may say to ourselves, well, this is impossible. So I might as well not do any mitzvah. Let me give up already before I begin. So here, through this very powerful Kabbalistic idea, Rabbi Steinsaltz is telling you, no, do what you can. Do with that what you're inclined to do. If you can grow in that journey, good. But pick one of the 630 mitzvot if you want to come close to God. If you want to feel God, go take some LSD. You come close, really, make yourself divine and come close and create a bridge between you and God. Then pick a mitzvah regardless of what it is. That can create this bridge, and that at the same time also can help you fulfill the mission of your soul. One more thing, and then we'll dive right into it, unless again there are any other comments. Rabbi Steinsaltz also mentions a revolutionary approach to the term mitzvah. Very often, mitzvah is translated as good deed, but that's not what it means. Yes, mitzvah maybe comes from the word commandment, so it's God commanding us to fulfill the 630 mitzvot, much of which are not applicable today because, again, they apply to the times of the temple and so on. But mitzvah means something deeper also, not just commandment. It comes from the word tzevet in Hebrew, which means team or connection, tzavta. That's because each time we do a mitzvah, we're connecting ourselves to God, regardless again of which mitzvah. And therefore the mitzvah itself, whichever mitzvah we choose to do, is really almost, the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory would say, it's like playing with an atomic bomb. Because it has this divine connection, and the divine is, of course, stronger and greater than this world. It's above time, above nature, like Sfat is above time, but it's even above anything else. Therefore, it has the power really to create this effect that transforms the world, whether we see it or not. It's almost like one atomic bomb versus a conventional bomb. Atomic bomb can really create a transformative effect on this world. And the mitzvah is the same thing. Why? Because again, by doing a mitzvah, we're teaming up with God. That connection, the divine connection, is not something that is very measured. Being divine, it's in essence not measured. It's immeasurable. And therefore the effect of this mitzvah is also immeasurable. And that's yet another thing to think of as we dive into this this 10th chapter of Rabbi Steinsaltz. Okay. Any questions before we begin the chapter? No? Okay. Who wants to read? The Jewish Way of Life. Again, page 113 in this book. I'm not sure what page it is in other editions. Someone has another edition, maybe. Yes, there.
At page 85 is my page.
In what book?
In the same book, Rabbi.
Oh, 85. Oh, yeah, but that edition. This edition is 113. That edition is 85. Okay. Does anyone want to read?
I guess I'll start, okay,
Please.
since I opened my mouth here. The Jewish way of life, or the way of life of a Jew who lives according to the Torah, is held to be extremely difficult. According to tradition, there are said to be 613 commandments in the Torah. This, however, is misleading in a number of respects. For one thing, many of the positive commandments, that is, mitzvot that obligate one to perform certain actions, along with many of the prohibitions, are not actually concerned with life, but refer either to the general structure of the whole of the Torah or to the Jewish nation as a body. No Jew, therefore, can be expected to keep all of the mitzvot. Actually, only a small number of the mitzvot relate to daily life, though if one adds to the formal list of all mitzvot all the minute details that are not specifically included, one arrives at a sum of not hundreds, but thousands of things that are to be done at certain times and certain places and in a special way. Indeed, seen as separate and unrelated commandments, each as an individual obligation and burden, these ancillary mitzvot seem to be a vast and even an absurd assortment of petty details, which, if not downright intimidating, then at least troublesome.
Right.
The book is telling you this, not me, right? I'm
going to explain this.
Okay.
Yeah.
What we call details, however, are only parts of greater units, which in turn combine in various ways into a single entity. It is as though in examining the leaves and flowers of a tree, one were to be overwhelmed by the abundance, the variety, the complexity of detail. But when one realizes that it's all part of the same single growth, all part of the same branching out into manifold forms of the one tree, then the details would cease to be disturbing and would be accepted as intrinsic to the wondrousness of the whole.
Right. Okay. So I don't know if you remember, in 1986, there was a space shuttle that took off with, I think, the first woman astronaut. What was it called? The Challenger, was it? Yeah. And it exploded a few seconds after takeoff.
Mhm.
I think it was like number 13, and that's what people were challenging.
There was a name to it. Doesn't matter. And then they inquired, they investigated, how did it explode and killing the astronaut on board?
Mhm.
That there was one screw. What is it called? The O-rod? Is that what it's called?
O-ring. O-ring.
O-ring. Thank you. There was an O-ring that wasn't screwed all the way, and that caused the gas leak, which then ignited the engine and the fire, and that exploded the shuttle. Why am I thinking of this? Because this is what Rabbi Steinsaltz is saying here, that although mitzvot have very specific structures, for example, Hanukkah is coming up. We have to light the menorah. Now, this includes a lot of things. It includes going to buy a menorah, going maybe to buy an olive oil or candle wax. It includes igniting the menorah. It includes ensuring that it is lit by the window or by the entrance, by the window that faces the outside or by the entrance of the home. All these mitzvot are all those screws that pertain to that specific mitzvah, which is lighting the menorah.
Mhm.
Every mitzvah has its own structure, as its own many details that pertain to that structure. And if one of those details is missing, it can really set the whole mitzvah on fire and destroy it, so to speak, like that shuttle. And that's why, even though these are details, we may see them as details, they are as important as the mitzvah itself. So when we do a mitzvah, our attention to detail must be as accurate and as focused as possible, so that the mitzvah itself can hold water. Otherwise, it can destroy the whole mitzvah. This is what Rabbi Steinsaltz is saying here. Now, that's why, even though there are 613 mitzvot, like he says here, I can be doing one mitzvah, but it includes 1,000 acts. So I can be, I don't know, the mitzvah of tefillin, for example, in the morning. So that includes also 1,000 acts. A mitzvah of mezuzah includes 1,000 acts. The mitzvah of respecting your parents includes 1,000 acts. Doesn't mean that those 1,000 acts are details and therefore unimportant. In the realm of mitzvahs, the mitzvah and its details have the same level of importance. That's why maybe the ethics of our father says that a light mitzvah has to be considered in your eyes as an important mitzvah. Continues to teach because we do not know the reward of the mitzvah. Not only do we not know the reward of the mitzvah, that a small mitzvah might have a huge reward, but we also don't know what ensures that the mitzvah soars to the heavens, takes off. What ensures this divine connection through the mitzvah, which is again the word for teaming up. What ensures that teaming up with God? What ensures that is even those small mitzvot. I think it's very reassuring. We spoke about this a little bit in the previous class, but I don't know why our minds are very often wired in a way that, I'm only going to do the important mitzvahs. The small mitzvahs, that's not for me. There's a mitzvah, for example, on how to tie your shoelaces, how to cut your nails, your fingernails. You might say, that's not as important as conducting your business honestly, or not standing idle when your brother's blood is being spilled. But who are you to tell? You cutting your nails in the proper way creates the exact same divine connection, if all the details are correct, of course, as you conducting your business honestly. I think it's very encouraging because we don't need to take big strides to connect to God. You can connect to God even when you tie your shoelaces. To me, that's very encouraging. That's why there's a beautiful Mishnah going back to the book of the Mishnah, which says, it says in the name of Rabbi Hanania ben Akashia Omer, Rabbi Hanania, the son of Akashia, who would say that, which means God wanted to bring merit upon the nation of Israel, and therefore he gave them many mitzvahs. If you think about this, that doesn't bring merit. It brings more responsibility. If I have many mitzvahs to fulfill, gosh, it's too much on my plate. But no, Rabbi Hanania ben Akashia understood the power of the mitzvah as we are studying it here. He said it doesn't matter the amount of mitzvahs. Why is it considered to be a merit that there are many mitzvahs? Because everyone can choose the mitzvah they want to do. Don't do all of them if you can, but do one. And that one that you will do creates the exact same effect as another one that other people may do. And I think that, therefore, we don't have to search very far away to do mitzvahs. It's a verse in Deuteronomy that says, Lo b'shamayim hi lemor, mi ya'aleh lanu hashamayim v'yikacheh lanu. That the Torah, mitzvahs, that connection with God is not in heaven. People might say, I have to soar to the heavens to connect to God. No, Lo b'shamayim, it's not in the heavens. V'lo me'ever layam, and it's not across the seas. And the verse in Deuteronomy concludes, Ki karov elecha davar me'od b'ficha u'levavcha la'asoto. It's very close to you, to your heart and to your mouth, to do it. Don't start searching for these big mitzvahs. Tie your shoelaces and connect to God in that realm. And you'll be creating that same connection. Karov elecha davar me'od. It's very, very close to you. That connection, that potential connection with God, that divine atomic reaction that a mitzvah can create. I'll share with you. I'm sorry, I'm monologuing, and then I'll open this up. But I'll share with you the story of Mendel Futerfas. We've mentioned in the past, Mendel Futerfas was a Hasidic Jew who suffered tremendously under the Soviet Union. He suffered tremendously also as an individual. I think he had 6 children. They all died in his lifetime. He himself, his father died when his mother was pregnant with him. That's why he was called up to the Torah, Menachem Mendel, Ben Menachem Mendel. He was named after his father, Menachem Mendel, the son of Menachem Mendel. And he was thrown into the Gulag for many years, just for practicing Judaism under the Soviet Union. And after he came out of the Gulag, he would tell many stories and many lessons that he learned in the Gulag from his inmates, from his Russian inmates. One of these stories was about his inmates right next to his cell. He would gather every night secretly and play cards. It was illegal to play cards. They could face a severe punishment for playing cards in the Gulag, but somehow they had a deck of cards and they would gather every night to play those cards. And time after time, when officers suspected that they were playing cards, they would storm their cell and the cards were nowhere to be found. And the guards would look everywhere for those cards, and they couldn't find them. So at one point, Mendel Futerfas turns to his cellmate and he says, you have to explain to me, how do you do this? I mean, I see it with my own eyes. You have cards every night, but they can't find it. And these guys are searching under your mattress everywhere. How do you do it? And the main guy, his name was Gregory. He says to Mendel Futterfass, look, besides playing cards, I was also a big magician. And when the officer comes to search our cell, I immediately gather the cards and put it in his pocket without him realizing it. And then he searches the whole room, but there's one place he forgets to search. That's his own pocket. When he's about to leave, I pickpocket the cards out of his pocket. And we have cards to play for the next night. And Mendel Futterfass would say, you see, this taught me one of the great life lessons I have to learn. Sometimes we search for big things and everywhere around us, but it's very close to you. It's in your own pocket. If you're tying your shoelaces, do it in a divine way. You'll be connecting to God with that simple internal action as much as those big, seemingly big external actions. So that's the big idea here. The details count. The O-rings count. I want to open this up. Does anyone have comments, suggestions, questions? Anyone? Told you it's about Lilmod Lamed. I'm here to learn. Yes, Joyce. Yes, you're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Okay. I'm thinking as soon as you were saying, or while you were talking, I just kept thinking, and maybe this is redundant and so simple, but it's like when you take a tiny pebble and you throw it into a lake or a river, it ripples.
Right.
Sometimes a big one, if you throw too big a rock, it sinks.
Right.
So I'm thinking of when you were talking, I kept feeling like ripples, like something about the word ripples kept coming.
Very good. The small actions, that's right. They create big changes. The big actions maybe create small changes. And it's true. And I would add just one word to it, evoking again Rabbi Steinsaltz's wisdom. When I asked him, as you all know, I've mentioned this a lot, but I think it's important to remind ourselves of this. When I asked him if he had to condense Judaism into one word, he said the word consistency. Not love, not kindness, not goodness, consistency. Being consistent with those small actions is really what creates that everlasting effect, that ripple effect. Doing one big deed as one singular action doesn't create that big of a change. A great story about the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Zaman of Lyadi, who was once fundraising for a bride and a groom who didn't have the money to get married, to have a proper ceremony and a proper banquet thereafter. So he fundraised all over town, and someone told him, hey, there's this wealthy guy, but he hasn't given money to anybody. He's the stingiest guy we know. Don't waste your time and knock on his door. Focus on the rest. Rabbi Zaman of Lyadi said, I'm not going to waste my time, but I'm going to go and knock on his door, that guy who you think is the stingiest. He knocked on his door and he said, look, I'm fundraising with a few other people. We're fundraising for a bride and a groom, for them to have a proper wedding. Masat Kala, it's called, one of the big mitzvahs. Will you give me some money? And he said no, and he slammed the door in his face. Rabbi Zaman of Lyadi was consistent, and he knocked on the door again. He said to him, I'm not going to give you, leave me alone. The third time, the man was so upset, he took a penny and he threw it in Rabbi Zaman Lyadi's face, and he said, now leave me alone, you have your tzedakah, you have your penny. Rabbi Zaman Lyadi was persistent, relentless, I would say. And he knocked on the door again. This time, the man says, you know what, come, let me hear more details. And he gives him a few more pennies. Then he knocks again. He gives him a few more pennies. Until this person, during the 10th time or 20th time or whatever it was, gave him the entire sum of what he was fundraising. When he left, the colleagues and friends of Rabbi Zaman Lyadi couldn't believe it. And I asked him, how do you do this? How do you have so much faith in this person? Rabbi Zaman of Lyadi quoted Maimonides, who says that sometimes the heart is sealed. So you have to create a crack, a small crack. And that crack then needs to create another crack and another crack until the heart opens up completely. So I saw that his heart was sealed, but I had faith that we can create a crack. Once that crack was created, when he threw that little penny in my face, I knew I could create more cracks and more cracks And eventually that small action, plus that small action, plus that small action is really what fundraise the sum. That's really, and by the way, it's practically speaking, it's also halacha. It's better to give 1 penny each day. Really, this is Jewish law. It's better to give 1 penny each day to tzedakah in a simple tzedakah box, whatever it may be, than to give $1,000 in one shot and then not give for a while, or to give $1 million in one shot and not give for a very long while. Why? Because that consistency of action, those details that we are learning about, really create those cracks, and eventually our heart opens up. With one action, it might create a slightly bigger crack, but the heart is not completely open with one big action. With those repetitive small actions, that's how the heart can really crack wide open. And that's why really we pay attention to details in Judaism and to the consistency of details, even if it's just 1 penny. Okay, any other? Yes, Gila, please.
So what's really interesting is that Rabbi Zalman of Lyadi didn't take any of this personally.
Right.
When the door was slammed, he didn't say, oh, this person, I don't want to have any contact. This is not good. He had the greater goal in mind.
Right.
So how do we bring that into our everyday lives here in the mystical town of Scottsdale to persist in encouraging what's right and not being too self-absorbed to walk away and to protect one's own self? He was extremely goal-oriented and he had someone else in mind. This was not for him. It was for, the Kabbalah. It was for, yeah. So how do we take that and bring it into our own interactions, our lives, in a meaningful way?
That's a good question. So I'm actually going to Google this. One of my favorite prayers is a prayer called Barich Shemay. And it's a prayer that we say each and every time we open the Ark on Shabbat, in which we Barich Shemay, we bless the name of God. Now, if I can find it, I'll share it with you. Barich Shemay. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find it because I think the accuracy of the words is very important. Can't find it, that doesn't matter. So the part of the prayer says that Anavda de Kuchabrichu, the Sagina Kamei, Umikame de Kauraita before Idan Vidan. I'm going to continue a little more. La Nash Chitzna, Velal Bagalain Samichna, Ella Belahad Ishmaya de Ula Dikshot, Voite Kishot, Voye Kishot, Maskele Meibat Avan Kishot. What does this mean? I am the slave or the servant of God. Anavda de Kuchabrichu. And I bow down only to him. I don't pray or I don't relate to human beings. And even the Son of God, I don't rely on. Only on God who is the truth, and on his Torah that is the truth, and on his prophets that are the truth. And one of the ways to act like Rabbi Zaman of Lyadi acted in the story is to recognize that human beings are only channels. But you can't rely on a channel as if it was the source itself. Source itself of everything is God. Ein od milvado. God, as we say every day in Aleinu prayer and verse in Deuteronomy, there's nothing else but God. If the channel is refusing to carry God's message, that's fine. I'll either persist with that same channel or I'll find a different channel. But I think we give too much faith, we put too much faith in Bagalahin, Samichta, and even the children of God. If we really want something to happen and we believe that it's a mitzvah, then let us relate to God directly. If there is a man who will become that channel with his blessing, great. If not, then be a different human being. So I think that's what Rabbi Zaman of Lyadi did. He said, okay, I know that the tzedakah is going to come for this bride. It's going to happen. God is going to open up that source of blessing. I hope it's going to be through the stingy man. And he persisted, and eventually it was through that stingy man. But I don't think he would have given up. If the stingy man would have said no, he would have gone to another, because he was God-oriented and not man-oriented. And I think in a way, it's important for us to remember that, know that we face many hurdles, many obstacles, but we can't lose our connection. We have to pour our hearts out to God. And in a way, if other human beings fail us, doesn't mean we have to give up altogether, because God is going to bless you. If we have that samichna, that complete reliance on God, then it's going to come.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's another great story about the Maharash. It was also one of the Lubavitcher rabbis, Rabbi Shmuel, who also went fundraising. And he asked also this very wealthy man for money for the same mitzvah, to make a marriage for a bride and a groom. And this man refused. And he didn't have the luck that his predecessor had, that Rabbi Zaman of Lyadi had. He didn't have that luck. But shortly thereafter, this wealthy man, lost his entire fortune. And this man came running to the Maharash, and he said to him, if I had known that saying no to you would have made me lose my entire fortune, I would have given you that money that you wanted. And the Maharash responded, you don't understand how God works. God made you wealthy because he trusted that you would take care of his funds, those funds that he puts in your bank account, those massive funds. And he trusts you that when God needs you to allocate these funds towards a bride and a groom, you will do that. Then you prove to God that you can't be trusted. So what did God do? He took these funds in your bank account and gave them to someone else. He can't trust you anymore. And that's why you lost all of your money. And he told him, if you promise me that from now on you'll be cognizant of that, and that you'll have the awareness that the money that you have is not your money. It's just being channeled through you. And when a mitzvah comes about, you have to heed the call, then you'll be wealthy again. And he became wealthy again. But that's really the way we relate to human beings. And doesn't mean that if we face a stingy man, we have to, in this particular context, of course, we have to give up. We rely samichna, it's a beautiful word. We rely on God and only on God. Yeah. Yes, Diana, yes.
Yes, I just wanted to make a point that hits me a lot with Rabbi Steinsaltz, and it did it again as we read the end of this paragraph, because I love when he uses imagery that comes from nature, talking about people. I just love every time he does that, and you can't forget it. So I just wanted to bring out that point.
No, thank you for bringing it up. It was very Rabbi Steinsaltz. He was very, very, very attentive to Hashem's beautiful world, whether it was through animals or through nature. I remember when he visited here in Scottsdale, and we were walking to CBT, he stopped at every cactus, every type of plant that there is. As we all know, there are many unique plants and flowers here in Arizona. Maybe not as unique as Tzfat, Rina, but at least we do have some diversity in nature here. And he was explaining to me every single biological aspect of that plant and the lessons it can teach us. That was a man. That was the man. I think the righteous, again, they see God in everything. That's the only thing they see. They don't see human beings. They see human beings as channels of God. So they're divine. They sees God in everything, even in nature. The small details of nature carry God's majesty. So he cared about that very much. I remember how I don't know why it comes to mind, but we were walking, and I don't even know what the Latin name for it is, but there's a cactus that's round and short and very spiky. You might know what I'm referring to.
Barrel cactus.
Sorry?
A little barrel cactus.
Yeah, maybe, but it's pretty big, right?
Yeah.
He tells me that in Hebrew it's called the mother-in-law's chair. And he went on to speak about reflect about the culture and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, he was very, very attentive. Very. He would stop by fruits and tell you this is venomous, this is not venomous, and he would start eating from those fruits and saying the blessing over it. Really just amazing. But they see God everywhere. God is not separated from this world. He's very intertwined with this world. Not many people can see it, but the righteous who have that eyesight, that vision, they can see it. There's something to learn from. And you're right. Thank you for pointing that out. Even in leaves, even in flowers, like he says here. Yeah. Okay, any other comment? Otherwise, we'll continue on.
Just, Rabbi, along the lines of what you just said, would you just share very briefly Parikshira, which is really about, it's a little book about nature, animals. How did Rabbi Steinsaltz, like, it seems like he extracted the most beautiful essence of nature and all of creation and incorporated it into all of his teachings. And would you tell us just 2 minutes of Parikshira, what that is?
Right. So thank you for bringing it up. So Parikshira, which means chapters of song, really relates to how every animal on the planet has a different song that they sing uniquely to God every day. Sometimes it's verses of Psalms, sometimes it's verses from the prophets. But every animal has its own song. And sometimes we can hear a dog barking, but they're really saying Psalm, I think 147. That's the Psalm of the dogs. And I think it's 147. It's in the 140s for sure. I don't know if it's 147, I think so. But God, we say this, Hallelujah Hashem kol haaretz, that the entire earth, the entire planet will praise God. Everything that's in it and everything that's on it praises God. And what can we do? That we are deaf to that music. At least I'm deaf. I don't know about you. I'm deaf to that music. But just imagine, and I think Rabbi Steinsaltz was not. Imagine we could hear this music each and every day. It would change our perspective on the world. It would change our perspective, our connection with God altogether. The first chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak Cohen Cook, has a famous line that says that you should know, Dalecha, that every single blade of grass has an angel. It comes from the Midrash, really. He changed the world a little bit, so I'm going to quote the Midrash. It says that every blade of grass is an angel tapping it, saying it, grow, saying to it, grow, grow, dal, dal, grow, grow. Imagine we would be able to see those angels, to hear them. We believe that they exist. We believe that that's what they do. And indeed, Hallelujah Hashem kol haaretz, every part of this world praises God. But if we can't hear it, at least we can attend to it or be aware of it. And I think it can change our perspective altogether on this world, on animals, on plants, on human beings, and also on our personal connection with God. God does this to each blade of grass. I think we have many angels too, each and every one of us, that tells us, grow, grow. And you have to listen to it. The Baal Shem Tov was once asked, the founder of the Hasidic movement was once asked, how come all of your students, they sing and dance? And really, Hasidim, as you know, right, they're very much into singing and dancing and worshiping Hashem with emotion. Beveit Elohim na'alech b'ragesh, as King David says. And in the house of God, we will walk with emotion. We can't give God any lip service. We have to approach God with our emotions. And the Hasidim excel at that. And they asked the Baal Shem Tov, why is it that the Hasidim dance and sing all the time? Calm down a little bit. And he gave a parable. He said that there was once a couple that moved into a new city. And they decided to take a stroll in that city. The problem was that this couple was deaf. Both of them were deaf. And they took a stroll in the new city to get to know it. And they passed by a wedding hall. And they looked through the window of the wedding hall. And they see people jumping up and down. But again, remember, they were deaf, so they can't connect to what is happening. So they said to each other, maybe with sign language, that these people in our new city are crazy. Let's get out of here. The Baal Shem Tov concluded, you see, there's music everywhere. And what can I do that some people are deaf? My Hasidim are not deaf, so they sing and dance all the time. Now, did they connect to every voice of every angel? Did they connect to every song of every animal? I don't know. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But at least the thought of this, the awareness of this, should make your heart dance. It should make you jump in ecstasy. It's important to remember that. Yeah, maybe that's why Rabbi Steinsaltz and other tzaddikim was so in tune with nature, with animals, with everything around them. Yeah. All right. Any comments? Otherwise, we can continue. But any other comments, questions, any disagreements? Okay. All right. Let's continue. Who wants to continue to read here on page 114? A basic idea underlying Jewish life. Anyone?
Struck
Go
me also.
Oh, Diana, go.
You're striking places in my head here, but
Okay.
it seems like every time we're doing a mitzvot, whether we're calling it a mitzvot because some people call different things mitzvot, but what you're really doing is connecting.
Absolutely. Savta, as mentioned, it's the connection that happens. It's an atomic connection that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's how you know, you feel that connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone has that. When they do a mitzvah, it feels good. When you give tzedakah, even though you gave maybe a nice amount, it feels good. When you help someone else, it feels good. Because your soul recognizes that this divine action occurred. This atomic divine action occurred. You have to be really, really, really numb, really covered with layers and layers not to feel that. But otherwise, I think most people feel that. And it's a sign again of that divine connection. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's continue. Basic idea underlying Jewish life. Anyone?
I'll read.
Please, Joyce, go for it. Thank you.
Basic idea underlying Jewish life is that there are no special frameworks for holiness. A man's relation to God is not set apart on a higher plane, not relegated to some special corner of time and place, with all the rest of life taking place somewhere else. The Jewish attitude is that life in all its aspects, in its totality, must somehow or other be bound up with holiness. This attitude is expressed in part through conscious action, that is, through the utterance of prescribed prayers and blessings and following prescribed forms of conduct, and in part by adhering to a number of prohibitions.
Right. I think that's one of the great and most beautiful differences between Judaism and other religions. And that is that holiness is not relegated to the few. In Christianity, if you're a Catholic and if you're a priest, and you don't marry and you do certain things, then you're considered holy, and then you climb up to the different levels of bishop, cardinal, and saint, or whatever it may be. And many other religions have that, by the way. In Judaism, anyone can be holy. Holiness is relegated to everybody. How so? Do a mitzvah, you'll be holy. That was one of the main points of Moses' discussion with Korach, who rebelled. Korach said, Kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim, everyone is holy. And why do you have leaders? And Moses replied, no, you're right. Everyone is holy. The structure is just an external one, but everyone is holy. And in a way, I think that's very encouraging again. Right now, depending on what you're doing, right now you can be as holy as the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It might not last as much as it lasts the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but Rabbi Steinsaltz. But for that specific moment in which you're doing a mitzvah, you're just as holy as him or her. Now, I also think that as he writes here, following prescribed forms of conduct, it can happen. We're talking about action, and yes, the emphasis here is through conscious action. But he also says forms of conduct. I think sometimes, conducting yourself and having a holy demeanor without action also makes you holy. It's this whole idea of Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. Now, Sanctifying God's name can be done by everyone and anyone, anyone and everyone, if they comport themselves in a commendable manner. And it doesn't have to entail any action. But when, Rabbi Steinsaltz, going back to Rabbi Steinsaltz, the author of this book, I recall I had the privilege of studying in his yeshiva in Mikor Chaim in high school. And I remember that there was once a discussion with Rabbi Steinsaltz asking him, how do you want the end product to look like? Your students, how do you want them to look like? You want them to be doctors? You want them to be rabbis? How do you want them to look like? Rabbi Steinsaltz's response was very powerful. And he said, this is how I want them to look like. When they graduate my high school, Mikor Chaim, I want them to be those people that walk in the street and people look twice at them. Once because they just walked next to them, and the second time because they noticed something different, something holy in the comportment. That's how I want my students to look like. Then walk in the street and makes a holy impact. Just that conduct. I think it's something we can all attain. People say, oh, there's someone different here, someone holy. Okay, it doesn't have to be through actions, but just your being emanates holiness. So it's important to, that line at least caught my attention and reminded me of his own words. Of course, it takes tremendous effort and devotion to a specific lifestyle. And I think if we're fragmented, we can't emanate this wholesome light of holiness. But it can be achieved even without action.